Hey guys, it's Crystal Briefs, and in this video I want to talk about Siege Walkback. Siege Walkback is something that saves the leader of an attacker from getting capped, whereas it's abominable to traps because the attacker gets information on what's inside, and not being able to cap is a simple humiliation. A number of you might have wondered why you often see the siege when you participated in a rally, so I'm going to introduce you to why we put siege and how it works. Then I'll talk about how to increase the rate of a siege walkback from an attacker's perspective, and also how to hinder that from a defender's viewpoint. First, let's learn the basics. So the report of a siege walkback looks like this. All troops on the attacker died except for siege, as you can see. When this happens, the leader doesn't get capped and walks back. This occurs because each battle has a time limit of 40 seconds and the defender wasn't strong enough to kill all the incoming troops within that time frame. This is primarily due to the location of the siege. If you see any formation, siege is always at the back. When any troops are killed at the forefront, the enemy troops still have to reach siege sitting far behind to successfully cap the leader. And oftentimes the 40 seconds expire during when they're just traveling to get to the siege. And it's important to note that tier and the number of siege don't really matter as much as you think. The vital part of a siege walkback is the mere existence of a siege squad in a battle. And that was the case for the report I showed you. Let's watch the battle movie to get better grasp on this. I'm gonna fast forward a bit. So actually, the battle ended just when the defender took down all the attacker's main force. This suggests that I still had some seconds to spare. Even if the defender destroyed my main army a few seconds earlier, I probably would have still got a walk back. Now, the question is, how effective siege is at inducing a walk back. When the defender is just too strong by having so many troops or stats, siege won't be able to rescue the leader. Siege cannot guarantee a walk back. But what if the defender is just strong enough to be able to blow up the attack with no siege right before 40 seconds expire? Adding siege to that would trigger a walkback very easily, and we would want to know how much the defender has to strengthen their army to devour siege in time. And this would indicate the effectiveness of adding the siege to your rally. So I tested this for you, but please remember it is subject to variations among combinations of troop types and formations you and your opponent construct. Actually, when I was testing for this video for like 3 hours straight, I discovered several new things which makes my theories a bit shaky, so always take my word with a pinch of salt. At the same time, I'm deeply struck with how profound the dynamics of this combat simulation could get. So anyway, I'm moving to my alt to have a better look at the battle reports. This is the reference without siege, in which I adjusted so that the defender just barely caps the leader. I went with Inf Blast against the defender in ranged wedge with the wall already broken, which I think is a common situation these days. By the way, I put extra 2 troops for the Inf, but can you think of why? It's to lock the target of Pact 5 familiar attack. If you don't do that, the Pact 5 familiars will randomly attack any squad and you never get consistent results. Anyway, if I added 1 ballista to this, I get a walkback. Then I tried increasing the defender's troop count bit by bit. In this one, I increased each troop type by 100. That's around 4 to 5% increase from the reference. And that's a walkback. But at the point of increasing 300 troops for each troop type, which is 13.6% increase in the number of troops, it resulted in a cap. What I did next is to roughly narrow down where the boundary is between a cap and a walkback. So I figured out that the boundary between a cap and a walkback with siege lies between 2,475 troops and 2,500 troops. That's around 13% increase from the reference. So in this very case, Siege Walkback can be induced up to 13% of increase from the reference in the defender's total attack. What this means is that if 20 million troops are just enough to cap a fully filled rally with no siege, you have to increase your troop count by 13% at least, maybe 20% to be sure. So you have to add 4 million more troops from 20 million, so that's quite huge. But remember, this test is just to demonstrate how siege is effective in preventing a cap, and the results cannot be applied to real targets because the conditions are dramatically different. Theoretically, every target has a boundary in their troop count that determines if siege walkback is possible or not, but there's no realistic way to find that out before actually hitting a castle. Furthermore, there's important thing happening in the capped report if you look at the movie. Pay attention to the defender's siege here. The attacker's siege was killed by the defender's retargeted siege, and the defender's main army was still trying to reach the siege. So if the defender didn't have the siege, the attacker could have escaped with a siege walkback. The next thing that I tried is adding a ranged buffer, and surprisingly it dramatically increased the rate of a siege walkback. The blast was getting capped at 2.2k each troop type by the defender, but by adding ranged buffer on top of the siege, the attacker becomes resistant to even 2.8k each troop type, which is 27% increase. So if 20 million is just enough to cap a rally without siege, you'd need to add 5.5 million to be able to cap a rally with the siege and the ranged buffer. So that's how Siege Walkback is effective. If you've never put Siege before and got capped many times, start putting Siege and you'll probably get a lot more walkbacks. But then again, the effectiveness of Siege is not the same across troop types you're going to use for the blast. It also changes across whether you counter or get countered, or by combinations of familiars, so if you're curious, I recommend you do your own experiment. So now we can talk about how to promote Siege Walkback from the attacker's perspective and how to thwart that from the defender's point of view. As you saw in the previous part, adding buffer troops other than Siege really helps with a walkback. Even if you're doing an inf blast in inf phalanx, buffer troops won't be a waste contrary to common practice. You'd also want to make sure that you break the wall before rally hits, because the presence of the wall can direct the defender's siege to target your siege from the beginning. In case of a range blast, that won't happen, but the benefit of the siege might be reduced due to their proximity. Actually, breaking the wall might occasionally hinder a siege walkback, the reason of which is a bit complicated, so I'll leave it up to you to think about or do your own experiment. Another thing you can do to promote Siege Walkback is to put enough number of siege that can withstand a couple of attacks from the defender's siege in case they can overtake the main defensive army and reach your siege first, although far less significant than having siege itself. Just one siege is sufficient in most cases. I only put 100 T2 siege in my army because higher tiers slow down my march. Some people put like 5,000 destroyer or even tier 5 siege, which is often unnecessary, but really depends on what worst case scenario each person is expecting. Now if you're a trap, how do you prevent a siege walkback? You've probably guessed it right. Have enough siege so that you can kill all the enemy siege with a single blow. In an active kingdom, a lot of war guilds won't probably care if they have to use carpets, so they might put like 10k destroyers in a rally. And you want to be able to blow up that 10k siege by the single attack of your siege. I'm not really sure, but you might need like 300 to 500k destroyers to achieve that. And if you can't afford that might increase, you might just want to have a couple millions of tier 1 siege. The next thing you can do is obviously increase your troop count or stats. If you've ever allowed a walkback before, you should increase your troop count or your attack stats by multiplicative 20 to 30%. It's difficult to increase your stats that much, so I think most of you would go for bulking up your troop count. Another thing you can do is to make sure to resurrect your broken wall. Having the wall is often effective in preventing a siege walkback, but might not be practical because it uses gems and it also shows to other players that you're online. You cannot resurrect a wall without letting others notice. Also, improving the familiar lineup on your wall might help, about which I'll make another video. Alright, I think that's pretty enough of Siege Walkback. At this point you might be fed up with a lot of talking, and I really appreciate your attention for such a long time. I have loads of ideas right now for my videos, but if there's anything you really want to know or understand about sooner, feel free to put that in the comment and I might prioritize that content to be released earlier. Also, if you want to see more of these intriguing topics, hit that subscribe button to get notified when new video gets released. Thank you so much for watching and see you later.